Well, we tried to start about 3 times today, and I think this is number 4. So, welcome to Conversations with Elan. I'm Lee Van Laer, and Elan Sikroff is here with me today to discuss note values and the fifth obligatory, and the way in which note values affect our perception of that piece. So, Elan, why don't you take it away?
Right. So going back to the previous discussions that conversations that we've had, the two or three previous conversations talking about Kandinsky and talking about the ideas of Kandinsky, which influenced Thomas de Hartmann. We've been looking at the question of dissonance and its relationship to light and the whole interrelationship or interconnectivity between sound and color and light. And one of the interesting things that I noticed about Thomas de Hartmann's compositions is that he almost never uses a trill. Now, and as I've discussed in the previous conversations, the trill conveys dissonance and conveys, to my mind, something to do with light energy, which can be verified by the listeners. Um, and I think that the reason that he didn't use trills, which that's a trill, the reason he didn't use trills for the most part was because he didn't need to, because he was already composing with a lot of dissonant intervals. It was 20th century idiom doesn't use that many trills because of just that fact. So when you see Thomas de Hartmann composing with a trill, it should alert you to something special that's going on. And a very, very good example of that comes up in the movement of the note values, where he has a trill at a certain point in the movement to accompany a certain gesture in the movement, which is very, very revealing. It tells you something about what the movement is about. So, but before we get there, I want to just make a very brief presentation about the name of this movement, which is called the note values. It's an invitation for us to find out something about the structure of the dances that we are engaging in. So if I were to ask, and I have tried this before, if I were to ask people who are in movements class, what's the rhythm of X movement? Most people never think of something like that. The teacher shows the gestures, the pianist plays, but there's no understanding of what the actual musical structure is. Here, Gurdjieff is giving an open invitation for us to understand what the note values are. And the note values are manifested in the very gestures that take place in this movement. So, combined with the fact that a friend of mine asked me to do a little bit of Music 101, I just want to go over what the note values are. And there are two systems of note values. There's the European system and there's the American system. We're going to talk about the American system, and then I'll make a brief mention of the European system. So the American system of note values begins with the idea of a whole note. And if you look at that diagram that Lee is displaying on the top note, the circle, that's a whole note, okay? And what I've drawn for you there is a rhythm, what I call a rhythm pyramid. In each whole note, there are two half notes, which are empty notes, just a circle with a stem on it. And in each of the half notes, there are two quarter notes, and those are black notes with stems. And then you go down further down the pyramid, you have eighth notes, which are black notes with a stem and a beam across, or a flag, depending upon how the music is written. But both of those indicate an eighth note. And then you have a 16th note, which has two flags or a double beam at the top of the join the 16th notes together. So there is one whole note in a whole note. There is two half notes in a whole note, four quarter notes in a whole note, eight eighth notes, 16 16th notes. Simple mathematics. And there's more to discuss because music is not always so square. Sometimes we want to have notes that are worth three beats, etc. That's not necessary for the discussion right now, so I'm going to leave it out. Uh, but those are the note values that we use. Okay. Now, in a piece of music, a quarter note or a whole note or a half note, they can each be worth different numbers of beats because that is relative. In other words, we can say in a piece of music, we could write a piece of music in whole notes and say four whole notes in every measure. One, two, three, four, one, two, and those are whole notes. Or we could call them half notes. The composer has the right
Yeah.
to say at the beginning of the piece, I'm writing to make the basic beat or the basic pulse is going to be in whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, sixteenths, and they do this. It's more unusual that they use these other beats than the quarter note because the quarter note generally is most music is written with the basic beat as being the quarter note. So in a time signature tells you how many beats there are in every measure. And remember what I was talking about before, that in a rhythm say in two, 1 2 1 2, the first beat is strong, the second beat is weaker. That's what defines two-ness. 1 2 3, first beat is strong, two and three are less. That defines threeness. And we write a bar. We have two lines that separate the bars between each other, and any combination of notes that adds up to whatever the basic beat is, that will give you a measure. So three quarter notes in a measure, three quarter time, three at the top of that time signature, which you can see underneath the rhythm pyramid. I've written a bunch of time signatures for you. 3 4. That means three quarter notes in a measure, four quarter notes in a measure. Okay, and four or 3/16 notes in a measure, 3/16 time, for example. Okay, I hope this is clear because then we turn to the subject of 4/4 time. 4/4 time is also called common time because it is the most common time signature. 1 2 3 4. 1 2 3 4. That is the most common. Most pieces by far are written in that time signature. Okay, so it's no accident that the note values, that movement, is also written in 4/4 time or common time, and sometimes that time signature is written as a C, which stands for common. Okay, now I was going to say also, I'll say one last thing before we move on to the actual movement itself. That, ooh, now I've forgotten. Uh, oh, yes. So, what I was going to say is, I wanted to just talk about the European model for the note values. Okay, so the whole note would be called a semi-breve. And then going down from there, the half note would be called the minim, the quarter note would be called the crotchet, the eighth note would be called a quaver, the 16th note would be called a semi-quaver. Now, you don't have to memorize these things, but I'm just showing that it's a different language. But the interesting thing is that the semi-breve is a whole note, which opens the question of, well, if that's a semi-breve, what's a breve? Okay, and so the breve is worth two whole note beats, and that is relevant to what we're going to be talking about for the note values, because the note values, whereas it is written in 4/4 time, in other words, 4 quarter note beats or a whole note total value for a measure, the feet do 8-beat gestures. So the feet in the note values are actually doing breathes. So in this movement, we have all of these different note values represented that the body is manifesting. We have the beginning with the breathe, then we have whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes. All right. So now let's.
I just want to, I'm a little worried here. You're not going to be showing us any breathing exercises, are you? Just as
I think
long
that's
as we don't do that, we're fine.
I think that's beyond the scope of this course. Okay, so now, um, well, before I go on, before we change the subject to the fifth obligatory, is this clear what I'm saying, Lee,
Yeah.
or is this?
Well, you threatened to give us Music 101, and I think you did give us Music 101. It's true that there are some people that don't understand the way music notation is written, and I think it is helpful for them. Um, I
Right.
wasn't exactly aware of the difference between the European and American systems, so that's a bit interesting. But let's get on to this piano piece that I suspect you're about to play it for
Yeah,
us.
except that I'm not going to play the whole piece
Yeah.
because then somebody's going to take this video and try to dance to the fifth
Oh
obligatory.
my God.
That would be just criminal.
Yes,
So,
for
so,
sure.
but let's just talk about the fifth obligatory. It's to me, it's the most interesting of all the obligatories, because really, you look at what Gurdjieff was doing with these obligatories. First of all, he uses that word, you are obliged to learn these before you begin working on the other dances. And this movement I consider to be a mini ritual movement. So, in spite of the fact that it's called the note values, which sounds very functional, this piece of this dance has a very, very deep thing that happens in this dance. Okay? And I'm sure that those of you who have worked at this dance are quite well aware of that fact. So let's begin and take a look at some of the things that happen in this movement. So now I'm going to bring this closer. Is this clear?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So we begin with. Now, those chords represent the first two gestures. And that first chord, the right arm comes out forward, pointing forward, as in the first obligatory, my path forward in life, my direction forward in life. That's the representative meaning, that first gesture. And we have no indication of when the pianist is going to play that chord. So we have to be alert to be able to play that chord on time. However, the second chord should not be in question as to when it happens, to when it comes in. So I'm going to play, and then I'm going to ask Lee, as a representative of the audience, if he can hear how I give the indication of when the second chord comes in. All right? And keep in mind, this piece of music and this dance is in 4/4 time, 4 quarter notes per measure. Okay? So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. You're going to play the next. You're going to change the gesture to the palm facing down on the beginning of the second measure. Okay, so what gave the? Let me just play it a different way. It'll give you a clue. Okay. What if I were to play it like this?
It's the note value that indicates what the timing is.
And how is the note value indicated in the way I played it?
Well, if the quarter note is the bass note, then there's four beats of the length that you hold that chord.
Exactly. So the note, that first note, and he writes forte on that, strong, meaning strong, and he writes a quarter note. So if you hold that a full quarter note beat, you have 1, 2. If you come off precisely on the second beat, then the class knows exactly what a beat is in that piece. Now, I forgot to mention one thing that goes before this, and that is that the composer also writes a tempo marking at the top of the page. In other words, the pulse, going back to this, he gives an indication of how fast the pulse should be. Now, this piece was written during Gurdjieff's, Hartmann's time with Gurdjieff between 1917 and 1924, before the first demonstration at the Champs-Élysées Theater. And he does not use metronome markings. He doesn't give you an exact number of beats, but he gives you an indication. And the indication here is andante. Andante meaning walking. So if we walk around, if we try walking, we will have an idea of what the basic pulse is. Or if we use the metronome marking, the general metronome marking, which I'm going to put on right now, we just see, because they have andante is in a range of about 73 to 78 beats per minute, comes out to about like this. Okay, so that's the beat, that's the general, that's the indication. So it's going to be 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Okay? And then the dance begins. Now, I just want to point out a couple of things that I've noticed over the years. I'm sure I haven't noticed everything that there is to notice on this musical score between itself and what's happening with the dance. And this conversation, this talk is an invitation for you to go into this music more deeply yourself, because I'm sure I'm going to miss some things. But here's an interesting point. So the first gesture has a chord that sounds like this. And the second gesture has a chord that sounds like this. Now, what's the difference between those two sounds?
Well, one of them has got a lot more consonants, and the other one it leans more into dissonance. I wouldn't
And
say
which,
there's no dissonance in the first chord. There's a little bit. I don't know which note it is, but there's one note that's inflecting that first chord. And it's in the bass, I think.
okay, and this,
It's more dissonant. That's all I can say. It
okay,
sounds more dissonant to me.
okay. So that's an open. Which chord sounds more? Um, well, if you listen, do you hear the question mark on that second
Yeah,
chord?
it's a more tentative chord.
It's a tent. It's so the first gesture is strong. The whole arm comes up, pointing forward, but then the next gesture that is indicated by the second chord is just a turning. So he
Mhm.
puts in, and one, and I'm not going to I would just add to what you said, um, Lee. The first chord is a major chord, and the second chord is a minor chord. And the minor goes sort of inwards. It's a little bit
Hmm.
more inwards. So the first out and then inward, question
Hmm.
mark. And what's happening with the hand? The hand is turning from the pointing forward with the palm facing left to now the palm is facing down. So now the palm is now in relation to the earth. It's now going to begin to have some kind of activity that's related to the here and now, not to looking forward, but to here and now. And it becomes a measuring stick. And that measuring stick is going to be what's happening with the dance. Now, I want to bring up, then this happens. Now, what is that? What is happening? How is that, um, how is that melody mirroring what the arm is doing? Can you hear it?
Well,
Let's
it's
see.
moving up a scale and then sliding back one note.
That's right. So the melody. Remember, I said a few conversations before. Melodies either go up or they go down or they stay the same. Notes go up or down or they stay the same. And here the arm is going down, up, down, up, down, up, right? That's the gesture that you're
Mm.
making to beat time. And Hartmann, he's not going to make a sound that sounds like this. I mean, that would be more accurate than what he's written there, but it would also be terribly boring if it was the same thing.
Well,
Has, but he has written a melody that goes up and down.
but I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah, go
And
on.
that is that it's an effort to move to the next note in the octave and sliding back down, which is something that he talks about, how we go do, re, mi, and then we can't get to the next note, so we go back one note, you know.
Oh, that's very interesting.
So he's actually illustrating the effort to move to the next note in the interval and failing and going back to where you were with that
Okay.
phrase. You see what
And
I'm saying?
yes, very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
So now this melody repeats a lot of times.
It's a
Finally,
picture of,
it doesn't really change he has to
well,
put,
it's
yeah, go ahead.
constant effort, you know.
It's constant effort. And this is what I feel about the first part of this movement. Okay, well, maybe I won't say that quite yet because I want to talk about. So we begin by beating quarter note beats with the right arm is doing quarter note beats. Then the left arm comes in, okay, and the left arm is doing it. It makes a gesture to the side. Now there are different schools of how that gesture should go, and I learned it a particular way when I was at Sherborne, and it could be that Mr. Bennett didn't have it correct, or that he did. We don't know. I don't know. I'm still not settled on where that is. But in any event, whatever happens, the left arm is beating in half beat gestures, right? To
Mhm.
the down to the side, up, forward, right? That's what the left arm. So now we have half notes, and at the same time we have the quarter notes going on. And there's something very interesting that Thomas de Hartmann writes in there, and keeping in mind that this movement uh, was written under the direction of Gurdjieff, you have to assume that everything that's written in this movement was approved by Gurdjieff, as opposed to how people feel about the 39 series, because Gurdjieff wasn't around when Hartmann composed the 39 series. So there are many more questions. So here's something really interesting. When when the left arm comes in, it goes And I'm playing that subito forte, which means suddenly loud, which is an accent. Okay, so the
Hmm.
accented, it's accent. So our right arm has got a tenuto marking, which just means it's just a basically, it's a pressure sort of. It's not a staccato movement. It's a much more sort of it's just a down tick tock type of movement, I would say. So now the arm comes in. Okay, so the arms, and you assume that they stay that way. So my question is, if he put those subito fortes there, how do you do that gesture? How would you make that gesture so that it is got that kind of accent to it without being harsh, right? But how do you preserve what? In other words, what is the interpretation? What is the piano part asking of the movements class to do there? It's something in my mind. It's something that's more than just definite. It has definite, but it actually has some heat involved with it. Okay, it's very strict. Okay, then the head comes in, and the head goes right for four, left for four. And that's here. So now all of a sudden we've got the arms, the right arm doing quarter note, the left arm doing half note, the head doing whole notes. Okay? So we have now the head. Again, he has subito forte written there. What does that mean to how you would actually perform that movement? Is it a gentle movement? Is it what is the actual quality that he's actually asking for? It's an open question in my mind. And then
Well,
when the
I would
yeah,
just interrupt and say that we could talk about the speed or force with which it's been to be done. But I think that the indication from the nature of the music is that it's the intentionality that enters here with which it's
okay,
done.
right. And I have also heard a movements teacher saying that the head has to be turned instantaneously,
Hmm.
right? So it's a gesture. On one instant, you're looking to the right, and the next instant, you're looking to the left. It is not a slow turn. So yes, I think that could have something to do with it, and it could have something to do with all of these markings, which is just saying this is the note values, and we want to be absolutely on time for these gestures. Then we come to the foot gestures, the legs, and he brings it down into a lower register. Remember, a long time ago, we were talking about the registers and how the registers are
Mm.
related to the chakras, and both you and I agreed about that. And here, Hartmann is writing with this 8 beats, a breve for the feet. So now, what's been happening, and then that continues, as you know, we go through that process for a period of time. Through all the gestures of the feet, which are 8 beats, and then we come to a new section. To my mind, this first section is mostly about the moving center and the thinking center working together. Okay. Now, everything that we do, however, involves all three centers, and I would say that the third center, the feeling center, would have to be connected with presence here, right?
Mm.
So I am present in my feelings as I'm doing these gestures. but this main part of the movement, this first part of the movement, is about functionality, about
Mhm.
thinking. I'm doing quarter notes, I'm doing half notes, and the moving of the gestures. All of a sudden,
Can I interrupt for a minute?
sure.
Well, I agree with your assessment. I was coming to rather the same impression of it myself. I'm just going to throw something out there. Is it possible that when you look at the piano and the way it moves from the lower to the highest register, that, and this is a very conceptual approach to it, that the lowest registers are sensation, the middle registers are intelligence, and that in fact is where most of the structure of music plays itself out, is in the center octaves of the piano, not in the bottom or the top. And the top, when it comes in, when you start playing the little notes that go up and down, they have a feeling center quality to them. They're very emotional. So you've got this emotional thing, and then you've got this intelligence that needs to be quick. And then you've
Uh-huh.
got this foundation in the bottom register. So he really is, as you say, speaking in the language of music about the work and the nature of the relationship between the centers. And he's bringing them together with musical phrases and registers and note values that blend them into a whole. So I think that your interpretation there is right on from my impression. I'm just kind of riffing on that in a broader version.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. When I listen to I mean, jumping ahead, and by the way, we are now at 30 minutes.
Yeah. If you're going to play a
and we
piece, we got to stop
and we
gabbing.
and we've done nothing.
We've
So
done nothing, but that's good. That's good. We should do nothing. Be open.
but I just want to say one thing about this. To my mind, when he gets to the Pio Mosso section, which we're not up to yet, but the that those are actually, to my mind, those are connected with higher emotions.
Could well be. I
You
go
know,
there. Yeah.
he. But that anyway. I'm jumping ahead.
Wonderful.
Do you want to stop here and continue this at another talk, or do you want to continue on?
Why don't we wrap it up for our viewers here? All of our attention spans being what they are. I'm not sure if you're ready to play a piece here at the end. You often do, but if you don't feel like it, don't worry about it.
Um, well,
It doesn't have to be the fifth obligatory, mind
no,
you.
no. I was thinking of play. I could play you one of the second. There are five of these pieces, Forces of Love and Sorcery. I've played one. I could play you the second one. We could gradually go through them.
I think
Okay.
everyone would be excited to hear that.
Okay. Um,
So now these were some of his early pieces. They were written before he met Kandinsky.
no, no, no. This is written. This is written after he met Kandinsky.
Aha.
This is actually
Okay.
from 19. This is from 1915. We
Okay.
don't we don't have any. Yes, I think it's 1915. Opus 16 from 1915. Confusing to my mind. Um, but we don't have very much music that was composed during the Kandinsky time, although there are some vocal works which we're thinking of recording. One piece for these songs from Ausonius in Latin, some Latin songs with contralto, sung by a contralto, which sounds pretty. The music is really quite extremely dissonant
Mm.
for such an early time, but we haven't recorded those pieces. So this is a little bit after. This is between Kandinsky and the time that he meets Gurdjieff, and I don't think it's an accident that he's looking at Forces of Love and Sorcery. That his spiritual search has already been what's it called, activated by Kandinsky, and he's writing on this kind of a subject matter. This is the second of these pieces is called the Gavotte, and which is a Baroque dance. Okay, and you have to keep in mind he's writing in this style of 17th, 18th century 17th century music. Okay?
Mm.
So,
Mm. A
okay.
very sprightly little piece.
A very sprightly little piece. And of course, this is only a reduction of a much larger group of instrumentalists and singers and
Mm.
dancers, by the way. De Harban was a dance composer way before he met Gurdjieff, and I've written down at least 5 ballets that he was working on before he began working on the
Mm.
movements with
Mm.
Gurdjieff,
Amazing.
which gave him the skills that I've been describing in the
Yeah.
discussion before.
Yeah. Well, that was terrific. Um, and I thank you for your time today in expounding on this for us. So, inshallah, next week we'll get another installment in.
We'll get done with this movement.
We'll get done with it.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks again, Elan. See you next time.
Okay.